these all made cameos in the film you just saw. And actually it leads me to a question, because in listening to you, and I think probably the audience is having this reaction, they're realizing how complicated it is, how many suspects there are, how many rabbit holes that you had to somehow bring into this film. And some people have said this is the kind of film you must see multiple times and then do some outside reading to understand. How would you respond to that?
In the world, as I read Fletcher Prouty's books, I mean, in the world of serious spy work, dirty work, black ops, you have to think like they do. And you're through the looking glass. They think smart. If you're going to pull off something like this, if you are going to pull off something like this, you have to organize it. It is an organization. And you know what you do? If you're really smart, you throw as many patsies, as many leads, as many herrings into a situation as you can. I kept running into Cubans, for example, the Bay of Pigs guys. There's a famous group that drove up there. A big guy, he's in the mention, I think, of the movie, but he didn't know what he was doing. He was just going there because somebody told him to go there. Go to Dallas, because they've been tracking Kennedy in Chicago, they tracked him in Miami, and maybe another place. I'm not on the details, but read Douglas's book. But go to Miami, go to Chicago, be around. There's a lot of confusion because you want confusion. But then everyone will come out of the woodwork with some story, and basically everyone sounds like a nut, right? Because they only know a little sliver of the whole. No one knows the whole.
Right. Most people who listen to me on this agree that I sound like a nut too, so I completely sympathize. And look, in addition to your doing all this intense research, I was also impressed that you encouraged actors to go out and do their research. And so Kevin Costner talked to not only talked to Garrison, he talked to loads of Garrison's friends and his enemies in New Orleans. You had Gary Oldham go down and talk to Maureen Oswald, the people who knew Maureen Oswald. The actors studied their characters in ways that I don't think is common.
We met several of the other Marines, who was a whole bunch of Marines who defected to the Soviet Union, and that was part of the program. And I mean, that carried forward. Everybody had a strange story. I mean, but this was a world of arms dealing, petty anti-crime. You know the famous Cuban man. He was famous at Watergate. I forgot his name. The big guy.
Yes.
That's the guy.
I put him out of my mind for a reason, but I know which one.
Sturgis, Frank Sturgis.
Frank Sturgis, who was one of the Watergate burglars.
Well, that kind of guy. I don't think he was involved, but I think he was. He obviously worked at CIA because they had a very major operation against Cuba called Mongoose. So these guys all talk, and they go to Dallas. Either you'll find we'll tell you what to do. Then they go to Dallas. They're around in a motel for 5 days, whatever it was, 3 days. Nobody tells them to do anything.
Right. They're just there to be. Now look, when this film came out, and I think you just experienced the impact again, particularly those of you who haven't seen it. It's a tremendous impact, I think, for anyone who's watched it. The Washington establishment reacted really almost violently to this film. You had an unusually large number of recognized authorities from elective office, defense and intelligence agencies, even historians, academics, top news media personalities went out of their way to condemn this film, or major parts of it. Why do you think this film, it's a film, why did this film generate such a stir? Why were they so determined to refute?
I was quite surprised, I assumed that it had gone by. It was 1991. That was, almost 30 years, 27 years afterwards. So it hadn't been in the news, and it had died out. There had been a wonderful low-key movie with Burt Lancaster called Executive Action in 1975, which is a very interesting movie. Executive Action, but had done no business. So,
and you mentioned the Parallax View. So
Parallax View was a fiction.
Right. Well, kind of.
Was based on
Kennedy figure in it.
Yeah. I knew we were in some kind of trouble. First of all, it was quite a big deal to get Dallas to cooperate because, the city council was quite divided on it. We needed permission to shoot Dealey Plaza, which we did. So you have to imagine what it was like to have 1,000 people in Dealey Plaza, our page, and shoot the president 25 to 30 times. Bullets going off. People of Dallas said this was quite something, and to do it again and again is hard. Believe me, it's painful on the karma. It's soul. And then there was this report in the second week. I knew something was up. There was a guy walking around the set and uninvited, looking for a script and snooping around. It was
Washington Post reporter.
Washington Post national security reporter, the top guy. George Lardner, right. So he didn't ask for an interview, nothing. He just wanted, and so we knew, we got our publicist involved, and we got Frank Mankiewicz involved. Frank Mankiewicz was the Robert Kennedy's press secretary, and was a liberal. And Frank really tried to help us, but we were in trouble because Lardner came out with a story about the third or fourth week of shooting, which distracted me enormously. Front page Sunday, tearing the film apart. He did get a hold of an old script because we kept changing the script and we made it better and better and tighter and tighter. So he was like driving a bulldozer truck through what he thought were story holes, making fun of it. There was cartoon in the Washington Post and all that, front page. So I was furious, and I called Bradley myself. And Bradley finally got him on the phone because I went to Graham because he wouldn't. I started.
Graham?
Yeah, we went together. Yeah. Screaming at her, oh no, she didn't want to talk, but then Bradley called back.
Yeah. She got Bradley.
Yeah, Bradley, it's the old mousetrap. I mean, he said, well, what do you want? I said, we'd like to have equal time, and we want to respond to this slander. But I forgot his dialogue, but he balked. But eventually he gave us like 2/3 of the space that he gave Lardner, and he had Lardner reply on us too. It was the following. It took several weeks to get the message from. 7 weeks. But Bradley had no, and who was Kennedy's friend, had no real interest in going back into this. No reporter in the so-called establishment media has any future to dig into this. None. Jefferson Morley would tell you that. You have no future. And the Washington Post a little further to the right, but there's no, a young newsman cannot make his name with this. If you came up with information, if you, for example, when John Connolly died, I suggested, why don't you just take out the DNA test on his the bullet in his wrist and try to dig up some of that information, see if it's the same bullet. No way you could do something like that. You can't even suggest anything.
Did you ever hear from the Kennedy family, or particularly the Lyndon Johnson people, after this movie came out?
Madeline Brown was in Dallas. I remember talking to her. Madeline Brown was his mistress. One of them.
They had a lot of them back then.
No, Lyndon was in Dallas, was known as a tough guy, and never in the movie did I suggest that he was involved in the assassination. And I don't believe he was. I think Fletcher Prouty said to me, who was the first one who heard the bullet? He passed right over his car. It was Lyndon Johnson. He was crouched down. He was scared shitless. He got the message. He was scared. I can't blame him. It was a scary day. But, he was down in the car, and the message was, don't fuck with the system. And I think that Lyndon Johnson went actually that Sunday, the day he met with the generals, and he talked about the war in Vietnam, and he wanted to pursue it, which was not Kennedy's policy, if you take into account the new histories that have come out. So Madeline Brown said, this guy was a tough guy. He used to beat her. But that's beside the point. But she said he was so clearly worried about the state of the mafia, the state of the Caribbean, what they were doing in Cuba. He knew there was so much dirt around this thing. He grabbed the Chief Justice Warren, made him become the head of the damn thing. Then he puts Dulles and Hoover on the paper, which is like ridiculous.
And Gerald Ford.
And Gerald Ford, yeah, Gerald Ford. That's a great one. Gerald Ford is the guy who did But so much was screwy, and Johnson knew it. But you asked about.
Well, I was wondering if the Kennedy family.
Oh, yeah, they were brutal.
They were brutal. Why were they brutal about it?
I don't know why. I always felt like this is a Hamlet type situation where I wish the family would do something. And the son would never go up there. I had dinner with John Jr. He was at George Magazine. I didn't push it. There was no way. I mean, he was kind of curious, but he was not the kind of person who would enter into this. But he wanted to speak with me, so there was some curiosity, but he was tended. It's very hard to be the son of a president and decide to get revenge and want to revenge him. It's a Hamlet situation if you look at it that way, because Hamlet doesn't have the power anymore. Robert Kennedy was very much in that position. He had to be very careful for those next 3 years because of Johnson's hated him. Not only that, but he also scared him. But they had a lot of dope, a lot of shit on Kennedy because of the Cuba situation, the mongoose situation. So it worked both ways. It's a dirty game.
You mentioned John Jr. asking to sit down with you. Did he want to discuss the film?
No.
No, he didn't get into the.
He wanted me to. I wrote articles for George Magazine. And he let me write one on conspiracies, actually. And he was a nice young man, but he wasn't of the metal. He didn't have the metal to go after this. And the people around Jackie, the Manchesters, they're all hacks. The hacks when it comes to this assassination, they won't go there. They just won't go there. They won't think about the unthinkable or the unspeakable.
But as I think we've just about run out of time, we may have time for a question or two. If you want to ask a question, I want you to be thinking about what you want to ask, but I do want to ask one final question from me, because I think this is a critical question. Your film had an impact that films rarely do. It actually led to the passage of a major piece of legislation called the John F. Kennedy Assassinations Records Collection Act of 1992. That's a mouthful, but it caused the release of many government records that have been held in secret since the assassination. However, incredibly, and we're approaching the 50th anniversary of the assassination. 50 years, almost all the principals are dead. Almost all the witnesses are dead. There's hardly anybody left. I've been down and talked to the few who are still living. There are approximately 50,000 records that relating to the assassination of John F. Kennedy still held in secret at the National Archives. Would you, Oliver, support or maybe even lead, given your influence, an effort to have the archives reorder their priorities so that they can release these records by the 50th anniversary of the assassination, November 22nd, 2013?
Well, yeah, but I think, I will certainly help you if you put my name on it.
Sounds like a lead. They won't listen to me. I can return it over.
Every little bit helps. Every little bit helps. I don't think there's going to be any smoking gun in these pages. But what happened in the last case was a lot of pages did slip out sideways. And when the professionals get in there, they find stuff that you can't believe. It's like Operation Northwoods, the terror campaign that was planned against Cuba in 1962, which is very important to understand because it leads so closely to Kennedy's death, the motivations. And Judge Tunheim, there was a lot of stuff in there, and there was a fellow wrote, sent me a 6-volume analysis of it. There was that much new stuff. It's not media sensational like makes headlines, so they ignore it. But there was Joanides, for example, Jeff Morley's following a fellow in the CIA Miami station against called Joanides. There's a lot of little details that are interesting. So that it would be helpful, and there might be some gold that we don't even know it's gold because it's boring, and then some fellow who knows something says, there it is.
A stray name here and there,
Yeah.
but can reveal a lot.
And Marina's still alive. I mean, Marina is an interesting. They really intimidated. They really held her in under pressure. And I won't tell anyone for quite a few days. That scared her.
All right, I see some hands up already. Oh, I see a lot of hands up. Well, we can't get to all of you, but I believe this lady's had her hand up longer than anybody, if I'm not mistaken. So what's your question? I'll make it short and I'll repeat it to everybody.
Okay, well, I'll be as loud as I can.
Yeah, no, they can't hear, so I'm going to repeat it. That's why I want you to be short, because I can't remember.
Thank you, Mr. Rigby. I had opportunity to meet you back in 1991 on behalf of her mother, Flavia, wanted to call her father, Will You want to go much with you? You wanted someone to pass it?
No, I don't want more complexity.
Flavia.
No, there's some great stories in there. There's great stories out there. That's
You're doing what Garrison did to it. Let's move to a real question about the JFK movie. Yes, you. Well, you're off topic. You can come up after it's over. It's on the JFK movie only. Yes, over here. I can't see you. Oh, is it Paul? Paul, you have no idea how bright these lights are. Paul Gaston from the History Department.
Great Air Force guy.
oh, yes. Right. That's correct. Mark Lane just put out a third book, which shows you the passion of the man who's been, again, he's been really attacked repeatedly. Even from the beginning, he was the bête noire of the New York Times, I think. But he's come back and he's written a third book, just released this week, and I saw him about a week ago. Yeah. That's right, about Max Holland, who was another one of the hacks that the Bureau used. He wrote something in the Yeah, Mark is an original, but, you know, I'm going off he didn't know about Garrison at that time when he wrote his first book. Bob Tannenbaum was involved too. Bob Tannenbaum was district attorney in New York and did some work with the 1970s investigation.
All right, I've been told we're virtually out of time. Somebody is desperate to ask this question back. This is it.
Thank you for being here. First of all, I just want to get your thoughts on the upcoming Tom Hanks movie, Sports of Unleavened.
Please, I hope he makes a dramatically incisive and interesting movie. I don't know that it would be something I'd want to see, but
Thanking our distinguished guest. How lucky we have been to have this time of